There's something way scarier about the unexplained than anything you actually can explain. Because at least with normal fear, your brain knows what it's looking at. But when something happens that genuinely makes no sense, that mess with you. And these stories, most of them actually sound uncomfortable talking about it at all. Like part of them still wishes they never experienced it. Tonight's stories, normal people, normal places. But little by little, things stop making sense. And by the end of these stories, you'll understand why some people never fully forget what they saw. I lived with my grandma for about 2 years when I was around 16, almost 17 by the end of it. I'm Allison. My parents both worked overseas at the time. They thought it would be easier if I stayed in one place instead of changing schools every year, so I stayed with my grandma. The house she lived in was old, even compared to the other houses there. It was one of those dark wooden houses with narrow rooms and uneven floors where you could feel certain spots dip under your feet. It had this gravel driveway and a detached garage that leaned slightly to one side, like it was tired. There were trees all around the back of the property, and behind that was just more woods. My grandma had lived there almost her whole life. I think her parents owned it first, then other relatives stayed there over the years. A lot of people had passed away in that house. I don't mean that in a weird way either, because old houses usually have people die in them eventually, especially when the same family keeps them for decades, but in that house it always felt excessive. Her brother passed away there in the downstairs bedroom from a heart attack. Her mom apparently passed away in the dining room after collapsing. One of my uncles overdosed in the upstairs bathroom years before I was born. There were others too. She used to mention them while cooking like it was nothing. I remember once she pointed at this corner near the staircase and said, "Your grandfather fell right there before they took him to hospice." Random stuff like that all the time. But honestly, the house itself didn't scare me at first. It just felt old. My grandma smoked in the kitchen when she thought nobody noticed. She watched game shows all day and kept the TV loud enough you could hear it from upstairs. I went to school, came home, ate whatever she cooked, and stayed in my room. My room used to belong to one of my older cousins when she stayed there years before. It was upstairs. At night, the trees would move against the glass when it was windy. There was this old floral wallpaper peeling near the corners, and my grandma wouldn't let me remove it because she said the wall underneath was probably damaged. The room wasn't big, just enough space for the bed, a dresser, a chair in the corner, and a little TV on a stand. The chair, remember that. It was this old cushioned chair with faded green fabric and wooden arms polished smooth from age. Nobody used it. My grandma just put random folded laundry on it most of the time. 4 or 5 months after I moved in, there was this bad smell near my bed. It smelled like rotten meat. I cleaned everything because I thought I dropped food somewhere. I pulled the bed away from the wall, vacuumed under it, washed every blanket and pillowcase. For like 2 days, it went away and then came back worse. I remember waking up one morning and immediately smelling it before I even opened my eyes fully. It was strongest around the mattress itself. I told my grandma and she thought mildew got into the mattress somehow because the house was old and got damp in winter. She helped me drag the mattress halfway downstairs, and we sprayed all this fabric cleaner on it and left windows open. Didn't help. Eventually she got annoyed with hearing me complain about it and bought me new sheets and blankets. I was embarrassed because I thought maybe somehow it was me. Like maybe my clothes smelled weird and I couldn't tell. I washed everything twice, took longer showers, started spraying perfume in the room constantly. The smell came back again anyway. Some nights, the room smelled normal. Then randomly around midnight or early morning, it would hit really hard, like something was sitting right beside the bed. I'd wake up from sleep because of it. Sometimes it smelled strongest near the foot of the mattress. I stopped inviting friends over because I didn't want them noticing it. What bothered me most was that nobody else seemed to smell it as strongly as I did. My grandma could smell something faint sometimes, but she kept saying old houses hold odors. She acted like I was overreacting. At that point, I started thinking I was making myself paranoid. One night, this was during winter, I had school the next morning and stayed up watching TV. Around 2 when I finally tried sleeping, The smell was there again that night, really bad this time. I almost went downstairs because of it, but I was tired enough that I figured I'd ignore it. I woke up suddenly because something hit the mattress from underneath. It literally felt exactly like someone underneath the bed kicked upward once with their foot. The wooden frame creaked and the mattress jolted under me. Again, a hard thump directly under where my legs were. I pulled my feet up. My entire body went cold. I thought somebody was under the bed. Not a ghost. I mean, like an actual person. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and turned the flashlight on. The smell was insanely strong then too. Stronger than ever. I leaned over enough to shine the light underneath. Nothing was there. The space under the bed wasn't even cluttered. Just a couple storage boxes and dust. No person, obviously. No animal. I sat there. Every time I relaxed, I kept thinking about how physical it felt. The mattress actually moved. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and went downstairs with my blanket and slept on the couch. My grandma woke up for work around 5 and asked why I was downstairs. For months after that, though, nothing happened. That's the weird part. The smell disappeared almost completely. Spring came around. I started thinking stress caused all of it because my parents were gone so much and I hated living there at first. Even now, part of me still tries explaining it that way. Summer in that town was really humid. My grandma would sit on the porch in the evenings with one of those little handheld fans while neighbors walked dogs past the house. I worked at a store nearby and spent most nights out with friends because I hated being inside during hot weather. The house always trapped heat upstairs. My room would feel 10 degrees hotter than downstairs. Nothing weird happened for a long time. Nothing touching the bed. Then sometime in early fall, my grandma and I went to this birthday party for one of my relatives. I barely even remember whose birthday it was. One of my cousins. It was at a house about 45 minutes away, and we stayed later than expected because older relatives kept talking forever. It was probably close to midnight. I remember being exhausted and irritated because I had work early the next morning. The house felt unusually cold when we walked in, even though the heat was on. My grandma immediately started complaining about her knees hurting from the drive and went into the kitchen. I went upstairs to grab my towel because I wanted a shower before bed. I walked into my room normally. Nothing weird at all. I turned the lamp on and threw my purse onto the bed. Then I realized I left the towel hanging on the bathroom door downstairs because I'd washed my hair earlier that day before the party. So I walked back downstairs. I talked to my grandma for like a minute while grabbing the towel. She was putting leftovers into containers and watching some late night news thing. Then I went upstairs again. And this, I cannot explain how fast it happened. I pushed my bedroom door open and immediately looked toward the chair in the corner because that's where I usually tossed clothes and stuff. Somebody sitting there. It made no sense. Then I realized what I was actually looking at. It looked like a woman and a child sitting together in the same chair, but not normally. Their bodies were sort of pressed into each other, almost overlapping. The woman looked pale, and I remember dark hair hanging down the side of her face. The kid looked really small. Both of them staring straight at me, without moving, and the smell hit me. I screamed and backed into the hallway wall. The towel dropped out of my hand. I remember hearing my grandma downstairs yell my name because I screamed so loud. When I looked back into the room again, they were still there. Still sitting in that chair, completely motionless. I ran downstairs crying so hard. I wasn't even looking where I was going. My grandma grabbed my arm and kept asking what happened. I remember her getting irritated before she got concerned because she thought somebody broke into the house. I refused to go back upstairs. I was standing near the kitchen table, shaking and crying, while she yelled up the staircase, asking who was up there. Nothing answered, obviously. Then she started acting annoyed again because the house was silent. I followed behind her eventually because I didn't want her going up alone. My grandma pushed the door open fully and turned the light on. The chair was empty. Nothing in the room looked disturbed. My towel was still lying in the hallway where I dropped it. The smell was gone like it never existed. My grandma searched, and I kept telling her it wasn't a real person. I didn't know how to explain it. She finally sat on the edge of the bed and just stared at me. She asked me what the woman looked like. I remember wiping my face and saying I didn't know because it happened fast. I told her dark hair, thin face. I mentioned the kid too, and how they looked almost connected together. Like the child was pressed against her chest. It was so wrong. Nothing else happened, and life kept returning to normal afterward. I'd go to school, work shifts at the grocery store, hang out with friends, come home. My grandma would complain about politics or watch old crime shows. Then late at night, I'd remember those faces in the chair and suddenly feel sick again. I stopped sleeping, wake up multiple times a night listening for sounds. Old houses make constant noises too, which doesn't help. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like footsteps upstairs before realizing I was already upstairs. Things got bad after that though, because I started noticing how strange my grandma acted about certain parts of the house, especially upstairs. I'm Louise. I grew up in this town in Michigan. And you know what? My parents still live there. Back then when this happened, I was around 21, and I was still living at home because I was taking classes at a community college nearby, while also helping my dad with his repair business sometimes. We lived off this long dirt road that connected to an even smaller side road, and our house sat back from the road with trees around most of it. A lot of people there had houses like that. People online now think this sounds fake already because of the exorcism thing, but where I lived, church stuff was very normal. Just people taking religion very serious. Different churches too, Baptist, Pentecostal, some Catholic families. My mom especially believed in all of it pretty deeply. She wasn't crazy. She just genuinely believed bad things could attach themselves to people. I didn't really know what I believed back then. I still don't know. I just know what I saw. The family this happened to lived like 10 minutes from us if you drove. Their house was older. The woman who supposedly got possessed was named Donna, middle-aged. I didn't know her personally, but everybody knew of her because she worked at this little store for years. Quiet lady, smoked. She had a husband, but I only saw him once or twice before all this happened. The rumors started slowly. Then people kept adding stuff onto it. Donna screaming at night. Donna speaking in some voice that didn't sound like her. I remember my dad rolling his eyes about parts of it because he hated gossip, but even he admitted something strange was going on, because apparently deputies had been called there at least once. Nobody knew details. That's how that town was, though. Information traveled fast, but never completely right. My mom became weirdly obsessed with the situation after a while. She kept saying she felt bad for Donna. One night, somebody from church called our house and told my parents church people were gathering there because they were handling it tonight. That's exactly how they said it, apparently. I didn't even want to go because I thought it sounded embarrassing. Like I pictured a bunch of dramatic people praying loudly around some mentally ill woman. That was what I expected, but my mom wanted to go, and my dad went because she didn't want to drive alone out there after dark. Then I ended up going too because there was literally nothing else to do, and at that age, I still followed my parents around more than I should have. When we got there, there were already cars lined along the road, headlights everywhere. It honestly reminded me of when somebody dies unexpectedly and everybody gathers outside before a funeral, except more nervous. Nobody was laughing. I remember that now that I think about it. Usually in small towns, even serious things turn into social events a little bit. But not that night. The house, lights on inside. There was mud everywhere from people walking around. You could hear somebody crying inside before we even got close, like exhausted crying. The church people there weren't wearing robes or anything weird like movies show, just regular people. My mom grabbed my arm before we walked up and quietly told me not to stare if Donna was acting strange because she's still a person. I remember that sentence exactly. It made me uncomfortable. We didn't go fully inside at first because too many people were crowding around already. We stayed near the doorway and kitchen area. The house smelled really bad. I can still remember the heat in there too, because they had the heat blasting and too many people packed inside. Then I finally saw Donna. She was sitting on the floor, and two women were next to her holding her shoulders. Her hair looked greasy and half covering her face. She kept twitching her head around really fast, like her neck hurt. I remember seeing her feet first for some reason, because she didn't have shoes on, even though it was freezing outside. Her feet were dirty like she'd been outside barefoot. I wish I could explain this next part better. Her face, it was wrong. Her eyes looked swollen and unfocused, and she kept making these low noises in her throat like she was trying not to throw up. One minute she'd be completely limp, then suddenly tense up hard enough where the women beside her struggled holding on to her. People were praying over her quietly. At one point, Donna looked directly toward the doorway where me and my parents were standing, and I swear her expression changed instantly. She looked furious, like genuinely hateful. Then she started laughing, but it sounded forced and painful at the same time. It sounded so human and not human together somehow. I remember my dad muttering "Jesus Christ" under his breath and pulling me slightly back from the doorway. Things escalated fast. Donna suddenly started yelling at one of the pastors and calling him disgusting names. Really graphic stuff. Everybody got tense immediately because apparently she was saying personal things about him she shouldn't have known. At least that's what people claimed later. I couldn't fully hear everything because too many people were talking over each other. Then she started choking noises, like hard choking noises. One of the women near her began crying. Somebody yelled for water. It became chaotic really fast. People pushing closer. Somebody praying loudly now instead of quietly. My mom started crying too, which scared me because she almost never cried in public. I honestly wanted to leave at that point. Eventually my dad did too. He told my mom we were going home because things were getting out of hand, and honestly there were too many people there already. But before we left, I remember one thing very specifically. Donna suddenly stopped moving completely. Dead still. Everybody went silent for a second because it was such a sudden change. Nobody reacted at first because people were confused. Then she started laughing. One of the pastors immediately told everyone to stop talking and continue praying. My dad practically dragged us out after that because my mom looked pale as hell. More people had arrived while we were inside, and some stood around smoking cigarettes near the road, asking others what was happening. My parents walked slower than me because my mom kept stopping to talk to people. I was uncomfortable and embarrassed to still be there, so I started walking ahead toward our car parked farther down the dirt road. Our road systems out there were weird, so people had parked all over both sides. My dad told me not to walk alone because it was dark and muddy, but I remember saying, "I'm fine. I just wanted to get home first." I felt sick after seeing Donna, so I started walking ahead alone. The road was lined with trees on both sides, and there weren't many house lights nearby once you got away from Donna's place. The ground was wet and soft, and my shoes kept sinking slightly into the mud. I could still hear voices behind me where everybody gathered near the house, but they got quieter the farther I walked. And then I heard this weird sound. It sounded almost like somebody moaning through their teeth. That was what scared me about it later when I thought back on it. It sounded close without sounding loud, if that makes sense. I stopped walking because I thought somebody was hurt in the woods. The sound happened again, and way longer this time. I remember turning around expecting my parents to be closer behind me, but they were still farther back near the lights from the house. I could see them barely moving down the road together. Something moved beside the trees to my right, like somebody crouching down. I just stared, trying to understand. It moved forward a little into clearer view, and I saw it was a woman. She was on all fours, completely on all fours, like an animal. Her arms looked too thin and pale against the dark ground, and her hair hung down over most of her face. I remember the skin. It looked unnaturally pale compared to everything around her, extremely pale. The moaning sound came, and this time I realized it was coming from her. She started crawling toward me slowly, head weirdly sideways the entire time. I couldn't even scream immediately. Then she moved faster. I stumbled backward and yelled for my parents. The second I screamed, the woman, whatever it was, suddenly turned sharply toward the huge tree beside the road and climbed it. I know how insane that sounds, but she climbed it still on all fours. She crawled straight up the trunk, and her hair swung around her face the whole time, And the worst part was how fast she disappeared upward into the dark branches. I started running before I even saw where she went in the tree. I just remember hearing branches shaking hard above me, and I completely lost it. I was screaming for my parents the entire time. My throat hurt afterward from how hard I yelled. My parents saw me running and my mom started yelling, asking what happened. I could barely talk. I was crying and trying to point back toward the road behind me. My dad thought I got attacked by an animal at first, because he kept looking around with this confused expression, trying to see if a dog or coyote came out of the woods. I remember grabbing my mom's jacket and saying there was a woman in the trees. I probably sounded insane. My dad walked a little farther toward where I came from, but I refused to let go of him. I genuinely thought if he walked too far ahead, something was going to come down out of the trees onto him. Even now, I still hate explaining this, but it felt completely real. I saw somebody. A couple other people from the house heard us yelling and came outside too, and my mom immediately started talking about how I saw somebody crawling near the road. My dad kept trying to calm everything down, saying maybe somebody from the house wandered outside during all the chaos. But I knew it wasn't Donna because the woman I saw looked younger, or maybe smaller. That part gets blurry in my memory because I was panicking so hard by then. I just knew it wasn't normal. Human beings do not move like that. The church guy asked exactly where I saw her, and I pointed toward the tree line. Nobody wanted me alone anymore after that. My mom had her arm around me so tight it hurt. My dad looked relieved hearing there was no person out there, but weirdly that made me feel worse because I knew what I saw. The older pastor asked me a lot of things. Did the woman say anything? Did her eyes look normal? Did I recognize her? Stuff like that. I mostly remembered the sound she made, that low moaning sound. The more I talked about it, the more embarrassed I started feeling because everybody kept staring at me like I was either traumatized or crazy. When we got home, my mom refused to let me go upstairs alone. Again, I know this all sounds extreme, but my family really believed in this stuff, especially after what happened at the house. My mom genuinely thought I might have encountered something evil. My dad didn't fully say he believed that, but he also didn't argue with her much either, which scared me more. This part of my life is blurry because it turned into this long, weird period where everybody around me acted like something bad had followed me home. My mom contacted people from church, and within a day or two, 2 different pastors came to our house. They walked through every room praying quietly and touching walls and windows. My parents wouldn't even let me stay alone at first. My mom especially watched me constantly. Looking back now, I think she genuinely thought I might suddenly become possessed too or something. She kept asking if I felt different, if I had nightmares, if I heard voices. I'm 33, and this happened when I was around 24 or 25. It was before I moved down to Tennessee for work, so I was still living in Ohio at the time and doing work for apartment buildings. My aunt owned this little cabin up in northern Michigan, near the woods outside the Traverse City area. I don't want to say the town name, but if you know Michigan, you know the kind of places I mean. A lot of locals. A lot of silence at night. That whole area around the Manistee National Forest has always had stories around it too. My Aunt Linda bought the cabin after her divorce because she wanted somewhere quiet to go during summers. It wasn't some creepy old shack. It was actually normal looking. Small but clean. She mostly used it during warmer months, but she let family stay there whenever they wanted. I'd gone there like 4 or 5 times before this happened, and nothing weird happened to me. Most of the trips were boring in a good way. I'd fish a little bit, sleep late, cook food, whatever. No signal most of the time. It forced you to sit there and exist without staring at your phone every 10 seconds. The road leading to the property was one of those long dirt roads where every car kicks up dust behind it. A couple scattered cabins around, tall trees everywhere. If the moon wasn't bright, you basically had darkness swallowing everything beyond the porch light. I went up there alone. My girlfriend at the time had just broken up with me. You both know it's ending before it actually does. So I took a few days off and drove up there with food, beer, fishing stuff, and my old laptop, thinking I'd just disappear for a weekend and clear my head. It rained most of the way there. I got to the cabin around 5 p.m. It was already cloudy and getting darker earlier because of the weather. Everything looked cool when I pulled up. My aunt always kept an extra key hidden inside this fake rock near the porch steps. The cabin smelled stale when I opened it because nobody had been there in a while. You know, that closed-up wood smell mixed with dust and old coffee filters. I opened windows for a bit and unpacked my stuff. So, the layout. Front door opened directly into the living room area. Couch against the wall facing this old TV. Coffee table. Kitchen connected off to the left side without a full wall separating it. Then there was a hallway behind the living room leading to the bathroom and bedrooms. At the very back of the kitchen, there was another door that led outside behind the cabin. My aunt always kept that back door locked. It started raining harder after dark too. Really heavy rain on the roof. One thing about being in woods during rain is it gets unbelievably black outside. Like if you looked out the windows, all you saw was your own reflection. Around 10, I started hearing sounds outside. There were animals everywhere out there. Coyotes. Sometimes deer would walk right near the porch. One time, years before, I'd heard what sounded exactly like a woman screaming, and my aunt explained foxes can sound weirdly human at night. So, I didn't think much about it, but I heard that scream, like pain. It came from somewhere out in the trees behind the cabin, and it lasted 3 or 4 seconds, long enough for me to freeze completely. I remember literally setting my beer down slowly because my hand started shaking. It stopped and the whole woods got dead quiet right after. It was probably an animal because logically what else would it be? But even now I've never heard another sound exactly like it. It had this human quality buried inside it that bothered me. Probably 15 minutes passed after that and nothing else happened. I remember debating whether to go outside and look around, which obviously would have been stupid. Instead, I locked the front door. Then I checked the back kitchen door too. Definitely locked. I specifically remember pulling on it twice because that scream had me unsettled more than I wanted to admit. After a while, I calmed down a little. I think your brain starts trying to normalize things if nothing immediately bad happens. I sat back on the couch and put some random nature documentary on low volume. I was tired from driving too, so eventually I started zoning out. Then this happened. I still can't explain. I saw a man walk through the cabin. Not I think I saw. Not maybe out of the corner of my eye. I saw him. I thought somebody had somehow come in through the front door because movement caught my attention. A man walked past the front window area toward the hallway leading to the back rooms. Not even sneaking. He was tall and thin, but this is the part that messed me up. I never heard the front door open. I was sitting literally facing that direction. The front door was like 12 feet away from me. If somebody came in, I would have heard the handle or the hinges or wet footsteps. But somehow, this figure just appeared already inside the cabin, moving calmly toward the back. I thought I'd fallen half asleep and gotten disoriented. But the second the figure passed the hallway entrance, adrenaline hit me so hard I stood up. I yelled, "Who the hell are you?" I grabbed the fireplace poker leaning near the wood stove and went toward the hallway. I checked the bathroom, both bedrooms empty. Then I checked the kitchen. Nobody. The back door was still locked. My brain literally could not process what had happened. There was nowhere for somebody to go. The cabin was tiny. No basement, no attic access, no other exits. And after all these years, I know what I saw. It wasn't shadow confusion. It wasn't a coat hanging somewhere. It moved exactly like a real person walking with purpose toward the back of the cabin. I checked outside eventually. I unlocked the back door and stepped out. Rain still coming down, trees moving in the wind, nobody there. I went back inside feeling sick to my stomach at that point. It felt wrong, like my brain knew something had just happened that wasn't supposed to be possible. I tried every explanation possible sitting there on that couch. The hallway light was on. I know for a fact I hadn't turned that light on earlier, but somehow it was just on now, casting this yellow light toward the living room. And while I was standing there, I heard something from outside again. Footsteps or something like that. At that point, I was basically done mentally. The footsteps outside weren't fast. That's what made it worse. They sounded slow moving through the leaves and wet ground behind the cabin, like somebody just pacing around back there in the dark. There wasn't really anybody to call. My aunt lived almost 4 hours away, and police out there would think I was drunk or losing my mind explaining a disappearing guy inside a cabin. The footsteps stopped after a minute. I kept staring toward the back windows over the kitchen sink. It was too dark to see anything outside except vague tree shapes every time lightning flashed far away. I was thinking I should just leave right then, but another part of me kept trying to force logic onto everything. I'd had a couple beers, long drive, weird woods sounds. Maybe I half dreamed the guy walking through the cabin. Your brain really fights to avoid accepting something that makes no sense. So instead of leaving immediately like a smart person, I sat back down on the couch. I don't know why. I kept thinking if I drove home over this, I'd feel stupid the next day after realizing it was nothing. I locked both doors again and sat there with every light on in the cabin. Around midnight, the rain started slowing down, and now I could hear farther into the woods. There's a certain kind of silence out in remote areas that people who grew up in cities probably don't get. It's not peaceful silence. It's heavy. I heard the scream again, farther away, still impossible to identify. It sounded almost human for a second, and then suddenly not human, like if something was trying to imitate a person but couldn't do it right. My entire body locked up again. I remember literally holding my breath, listening to it fade off somewhere deeper in the woods. Seconds later, something tapped the front window. I actually felt pain in my neck from how tense I got. The curtains were open enough where if somebody was standing out there, they could see directly inside. But from where I sat, I couldn't fully see the porch without getting closer. Every instinct in me was saying, don't look outside, but obviously I looked anyway, because humans are stupid. I stepped near the window and aimed the flashlight through the glass toward the porch. The flashlight beam moved farther past the porch toward the trees, and for 1 second I saw somebody standing between the trunks. Tall, still. I remember saying, "What the F?" The flashlight beam shook because my hand was shaking, and when I steadied it again, the figure was gone. That was the exact moment I decided I needed to leave. I was genuinely terrified I'd see that man walking through the cabin again. I found the front door unlocked. I locked it earlier, multiple times, because the scream had already happened by then. But when I grabbed the handle to leave, it opened immediately. I backed away from the door for a second because that scared me more than if it had stayed locked. It made me feel like somebody had been inside again without me noticing. I checked the whole cabin one more time after that. Every room, it was completely empty. If you walked in right then, you'd think somebody was just packing up to leave after a normal weekend. Meanwhile, I felt like I was seconds away from completely losing it mentally. I forced myself outside, carrying my bags and locking the cabin behind me. The woods around the driveway looked unbelievably dark. The second I got inside the car and locked the doors, I felt a little safer, but not much. I ended up getting a motel room somewhere Cadillac because I was too exhausted to drive all the way home.